This is Martin Giles of the Guildford Dragon News. And as part of our series of interviews with Guildford candidates in the forthcoming election for the new West Surrey Council, I am now with Howard Smith, of a Labour Party candidate for Guildford West. I nearly said Westborough, but it's Guildford West because we've got these new ward names. Okay, welcome back to the Guildford Dragon, Howard.
Thank you, Martin. Good to
Or
see
should
you.
I
Good.
say, your worshipful mayor?
Until tomorrow.
Yeah, until tomorrow.
Last day.
Okay. Now,
This time.
you've stood previously in quite a few local elections and indeed in a national election as well. And you were elected as a borough councillor for Westborough in 2023. And as soon as you've just said, completing your year as the mayor of Guildford. We won't go into that. I do hope to talk to you about that at some stage, but not in this interview. But in this election, why is it important for Guildford West voters to vote for a Labour candidate, would you say? Or for voters throughout West Surrey? Why should they vote for a Labour candidate?
I think the track record of Labour councillors is really really exemplary, to be honest. We've had some legendary councillors in the past, Bill Bellaby and Angela Gunning and others. Whenever we've had Labour councillors, they've always worked hard, been conscientious. Um, Responded to their residents' concerns and done a lot of good work. And so I think it's always good to, obviously, I'm biased and I would say that, but we've got a proud record of councillors in Guildford and hopefully that will continue.
But unlike other national parties, you could not get more than one candidate per ward. Why is that?
Well, I've seen in the past, from my experience, that we've seen, and particularly other parties, have stood a lot of paper candidates. In fact, paper candidates often get elected, which is can be a disaster for the council. So we've had a long think about it. We've decided to only field people that we think will really work hard for their residents, and those are the people that we presented as candidates in this election. I mean, on a broader point, I mean, I know you've raised concerns about people bringing, too much party politics into local elections, and I actually do think, on a sort of wider philosophical point, is that if you have one candidate in one ward from one party and one candidate from another, it puts you in a situation where you have to work together. And I'd really like to see parties working together more. And that would, I mean, if they passed a rule, which obviously they wouldn't, to say you could only have one candidate from each party in a two-member ward, I think you'd find a lot more cooperation, a lot more working together, and that's what I've tried to do, certainly as a councillor at Guildford, and it would stop bringing too much party politics into local. But to be honest with you, local government isn't about party politics. It's about people knuckling down, working hard for their residents, and that's what I think certainly I've tried to do, and I think that's what you would get from Labour councillors in Guildford.
I suspect a lot of people sympathise with that view, but in that case, why have national party labels at all?
I don't know. I can't answer that. That seems to be the way that it is. I mean, I think one advantage clearly of having a party label is that the sort of basically where people are coming from, their philosophy, and I know that if I'm voting for a Labour candidate, I know what Labour Party values are, fairness, equality of opportunity, that kind of thing. And I think it sort of gives you an indication of where in the political spectrum certainly the candidate is. So, if I were to minded to vote for a Conservative, I know the sort of philosophy that candidate has, and I think that is quite useful to know. But I think a lot of that is left behind when you get to the council floor. I'm always happy to work with other people from other parties if we're, on the same page, working to make Guildford a better place, and particularly in my ward, where I'm elected to represent the residents.
Okay, so having said that national party labels shouldn't count for too much, which party is going to win most seats in West Surrey, do you think?
Well, if you mean if we don't,
Well,
uh,
you can say whoever you like.
well, I think it's really difficult to call actually this time. I think we seem to obviously we've got candidates from other parties, which we've not certainly in my ward that we haven't had before. and across the spectrum. And
You
this
mean
has been
Reform UK, I guess, do you?
Reform and the Greens.
And the
So
Greens,
you
yeah.
we've got, some are I would regard as opportunities, or bandwagon jumpers. But they've all sort of piled in this time, and so it's I think it's hard to call. But obviously we've had a lot of Lib Dem councillors recently, so they're in with a pretty good chance, I would think. But it's going to be a very interesting election.
Do you think there's going to be overall control by one party, or can you see no overall control, or you just don't know?
I wish I could predict how it's going to go, but I don't know. I really don't. I think it's going to be very interesting, and I think, there could be a few surprises this time.
Okay. Now, it's well known that there's around £4 billion worth of legacy debt from various councils in West Surrey, Conservative councils, it should be said, that built up that debt.
Mhm.
How can the new council start off with that debt hanging around its neck? It'll be effectively bankrupt, and the commissioners will have to be called in as they have been at Woking, won't they?
Yeah, I think there's been some very, very strong hints from national government that there will be further bailouts. Obviously, there's been a £500 million bailout for Woking, and I think once the dust has settled and we know where we are, I think there'll be further bailouts from national government. I think inevitably, that will come to pass. And I think a lot of fuss is being made at the moment about this issue. Clearly, the West Surrey is not going to start off with a massive amount of debt. National government have made hints that that's going to happen. I think quite rightly they haven't said exactly what it's going to be right now because there's still a lot of work to do with the finances and everything. But that will come. I'm pretty confident of that.
Well, you say there's a lot of fuss being made about it, but shouldn't we be making a fuss about it? I mean, we're about to vote for a council where we haven't got a clue whether they're going to be financially solvent or not.
I think if you're clued in and you do your research, Martin, you'll find that there's very strong hints that the government will bail them out. I don't think there's any chance that there won't be a bailout. And you can make
Well,
a
has there
big,
been an announcement then?
not that I'm aware of, but
No,
I
exactly. So why? How are people meant to be aware of something if it's just sort of nods and winks behind the scenes at Westminster?
I don't think it's. I think it's more than nods and winks, but I think you'll find that there will be a.
Well,
If
please
you
send me whatever you learn because I certainly haven't seen it and I've been paying attention on it.
So you realistically, Martin, you realistically think that this council is going to go straight into bankruptcy from day one? You honestly think that? That's your
Well,
honest
it
belief?
doesn't matter what I think, Howard. What I wonder though is how anyone can vote for anybody in this election when they don't even know what the budget situation could be, or whether the council's going to be solvent. If that should have been sorted out, it seems to me, well before there was an election. I mean, let me just read you something. Have you read the House of Commons research briefing paper on unitary authorities?
No, I haven't.
No, fair enough. But it says in there, ideally, the first elections to any new body should take place ahead of the date of the reorganisation. Well, that's happening. So that the initial strategic and budget planning is shaped and directed by newly elected councillors. How can they shape and strategically plan when they don't know what the deal is going to be on the legacy debt?
Okay, I'll have a side bet with you, Martin, that there will be further bailouts. I'll take that bet from you. And if you want to
I know, but
wager, happy to do it. You say it's not your view doesn't matter, but you're putting the questions and I'm answering your questions.
well, yeah, but I'm fair enough. But I think a lot of people are asking that question, and I don't understand why this issue was not resolved before we decided to merge with other councils. I mean, I know that it was the Conservative Surrey County Council that volunteered Surrey to be on an accelerated path, but the Labour Party government agreed to it. And to lots of people, that was a reckless decision because of the legacy debt. In fact, you could make a good argument for Surrey being on a slow route to unitary reorganisation rather than a fast route.
Hmm. Okay. Well, I'm not in charge of the government, so I can't say definitively when that bailout is going to come. But I would, I would be I would absolutely guarantee that that bailout will come because it will have to come and it will come in due course. And if you want to find out more, then I'm probably not the person to ask because I'm a local councillor in Guildford, not running the government.
No, you're not. But you are a Labour councillor. Did you tell your party colleagues in government how impractical their decision was?
Well, I was on the phone to Keir Starmer last week and I made that point to him quite vigorously. No, of course not. I don't have a hotline to national government.
I
I'd
thought
be
you were going to
surprised.
give me a good story there.
Surprised you'd be you'd be surprised if I said I did. So,
Okay.
but it's a good question, and it is an unfair play to you. It is an important question. I don't have the answer to that question. All I can tell you is that most people that are familiar with the subject accept that there will be further bailouts, as there has been already. They're not. We don't have it yet, but it will be coming.
Do you think it would be fair for Guildford taxpayers to have to start paying off this debt when they?
No,
Okay. And do you think that Guildford assets, for example, Guildford House, used as an art gallery, as you know, do you think that those kind of assets should be sold off to pay for this debt?
no, I don't believe they will be. No,
Okay.
no. I think there's an
You're
uncertainty.
confident that it is going to be resolved by the government. It's just that they haven't bothered to do it before we go into this election.
Well, I feel like there's a long history of Conservatives racking up recklessly big debts and the Labour Party having to come in along with the health service and everything else and try to straighten things out and put them right again.
Oh,
And
I
I
mean, there's
believe
no
that
doubt it was Conservative councils that built up the debt. I mean, that is beyond doubt.
well, 100%. And so, and it always seems to be throughout history of this country that huge debts are racked up by the Conservative Party, and when the Labour Party come in, whatever it is of different types and different forms, the Labour Party ends up bailing them out by by having to sort out the nation's finances. I
I
mean,
mean,
let's face it, there's national government. If I can, if you want to talk about national politics just for a second, the Labour Party inherited an absolute wreckage of an economy, and now everyone's saying, why aren't you bailing out councils? Well, the problem is the debt that was run out by those councils, not when is the bailout coming. The bailout will come. Unfortunately, there's not the money because the Conservatives spent it all and left us with a wreck of an economy. And I think most people would accept that.
okay. And also, if I was living in Cumbria, I might say, why should my tax go to bail out councils in Surrey? Well, nothing to do with us. We've got our own needs up here.
Absolutely, it's very frustrating. It'd be frustrating for everyone, but you've got to look to where who caused these debts,
Okay.
and make sure history doesn't repeat itself. Make sure
Okay.
we don't get into this situation again. Don't vote Conservative.
Right. So now, you any spending, obviously, when it
Yeah.
comes to West Surrey Council, is going to depend on how that debt issue is resolved, and you're saying it will be. Now, is that uncertainty is why you've made so few commitments in the election pamphlet I've read, at least? I know it's not the only one you've issued, but in the one I've read.
I think my personal view is that when candidates go into their leaflets and say we're going to do free bins or we're going to do free parking or we're going to build 3,000 council houses, I think most residents are quite right to be fairly cynical about making sort of these big promises in their campaigns. And so I've resisted the urge to do that. What I've said is that here's some things that I've been working on in my ward, particularly to do with housing, to do with HMO, houses of multiple occupation, and those sorts of things. If you want these things, if you want my work on this to continue, and then I'm the person to vote for, because I feel like I'm a good, conscientious, hardworking councillor. Responds to. I was out this morning speaking to residents that've got housing issues, as I seem to be every week, trying to get people into better homes, to sort out the mess that in my ward we've had at least a decade of neglect. And I'm finding myself in the situation of trying to improve that. Now, if you want a counsellor that's going to work hard for you, not make big promises about free this and free that, but if you want someone that's going to respond to your concerns, try and sort things out, then I'm the person to vote for. If you think there's someone else who can do that better, vote for them. Absolutely, no problem. That's democracy. But I'm presenting myself on the track record of the last 3 years of what I've done for residents in Westborough, and obviously it's now become Guildford West, and that for me is a much more honest presentation of yourself rather than saying we're going to do free bins, free parking, build thousands of council houses which never materialise, and all the rest of it. So that's really, if you like, my pitch to the voters in
Okay,
Guildford West.
okay, fair enough. So, but you have mentioned a few things in your pamphlet: better parking, youth clubs, more council homes, and I guess improved bus services. Um,
Mhm.
I'm presuming that there is a resolution and there's some funding available. What are you going to do about parking?
Well, the problem with parking is one of the issues, certainly in my ward, is that we've converted far too many family homes into seven-bed houses of multiple occupation, with the theory that people are going to take buses or going to use bicycles, and that's just not the case. So we've done a lot of work, me with residents, done a lot of work to try and um, make sure that my ward isn't overrun by houses of multiple occupation. So the first step is trying to stop too many cars being in the ward in the first place. The second thing is then you've got to try and work out what you can do within the current limits of putting double yellow lines and putting parking restrictions in so that, cars can still get up and down the street. And then the third thing is to see whether residents would be in favour of permit scheme. And there's two sides to that. And some people think a permit scheme would really help. And other people think, why should I pay, 50, 60, 70 pounds a year, whatever it is, to park outside my own house? So it's a difficult question. But we do need to address parking issues. But we've got to try and, limit it at the source to begin with
Okay.
before we start to tackle the other issues.
And is this a particular problem in Westborough, or is it throughout a particular problem in Westborough?
It is a particular problem in Westborough because I've got roads in Westborough that have got 30 houses of multiple large converted houses of multiple occupation with seven beds in now, and it's being overrun by cars and traffic problems, and that is one of the big issues that I've got in my ward, and it's a great concern to very many of my residents.
Okay. And then youth clubs. What are you going to do about youth clubs?
Well, I think, I've got young children, they go to football training and they go to brownies and they go to all these sorts of things. And I can see the value of that. What I'd like to see is the council taking a more proactive role in using some of the spaces that we got, some of the buildings and spaces that we got to try and do more, to attract more sort of youth groups and things like that, so that kids have got more to do in the evening. Now, the schools, I know from my own experience with my two. Schools do a lot of that now, and after school clubs. But it would be nice to have more youth clubs and that. And I'd like to see Guildford, the councils in Guildford doing more in that line along those lines.
Okay. And then bus services.
Well, there's some of our bus services are quite good, but it's a scandal that we no longer have a bus service to the Spectrum, and I get a lot of people raising that as an issue that we know if you're not able to drive and you have mobility issues or anything like that, you can't currently get a bus to the Spectrum. You can get a bus to Stoke Park and you can walk the rest, but and I think there are gaps in the bus services that we have that we need to address. I mean, it's the Spectrum is a fantastic facility, but it should be there for everyone to use, not just for able-bodied people.